Hi, and welcome back to Lisa's Stamp Studio. My fun fold card for you today has a slight angle to it, and it's super easy to create. I'm going to add some embellishments to the front, but of course you can keep yours as simple as you'd like. Here's a quick look at the card today, and it has a fun pull-out for the insert. If this is your first time visiting my YouTube channel, I would love to encourage you to subscribe. Make sure you click that subscribe button down below, and next to it is a small bell icon. If you click that, you'll receive notifications when I'm live here on YouTube, as well as when I upload a new video. Let's head over to the stamp table and let's get started on today's card. Here's a close-up of the card we're going to be creating together today. This fun insert will pull out, which reveals the greeting. Really lots of fun to create, and of course lots of variations for this card. I'm starting with a piece of real red cardstock. This measures 5.5 by 8.5. I did score it in the center at 4 1/4 right before you joined me. I'm a big fan of that bone folder for a nice crisp edge on my card. I'm going to be using a pencil to make small marks on my cardstock so that I know where I want to cut it on an angle. It's not important to make an exact angle. You can create this on any angle that you'd like. But for those of you that like exact instructions, I'm going to be using one of the small grid papers. I want to make my first line here at 1.5 inches. Each one of these boxes is 1/4 inch. You can even come down here to the bottom and measure over 1.5 inches. And all I'm going to do is just measure over those blocks and make a small pencil line here to indicate where I'm going to cut. Now I know that's going to be difficult to see in the video, but I'll make sure I have all the cutting dimensions down in the video description below, which will lead you over to the pictures as well. I want a pencil mark on this side as well. So I'm going to line it up here at the very top because that's where the 1 starts. And I'm going to measure down 3 inches. I'm going to make a little tick mark there. I've got my paper trimmer here and my dark blade cuts. So what I'm going to do is open up the card base. So I've got one pencil line here and I've got another pencil line here. So all I did was manipulate the paper so that both of those tick marks are lined up within the cutting track of the trimmer. And then I'll just slice. I'm going to be using the Buffalo Check background stamp to create a little bit of an interesting background here. So I'm going to turn that face up on my work surface. I'm going to use that same piece of grid paper again as my scratch paper. Mine is wood mounted. They do come cling mounted, which would be great for your stamp positioning tool, the Stamparatus. And I'm going to go ahead and ink that up in the black Memento ink. I'm careful to make sure that I cover the areas well because I want to make sure this is nice and solid. Leaving the stamp face up on the table and inked. I'm now turning my card so that it's upside down, and I'm going to lay this right on top of this background stamp, looking to align the crease the very best that I can. And then once it's in position, I'm going to take my scratch paper and place it right over the top. This is actually going to allow me to rub from this side to transfer the image from the bottom up. I have some osteoarthritis in my joints, and I find that this is a lot easier than trying to lift this very large stamp. So just go over it and rub it well. I've flipped that paper over, and next we're going to work on the tree image. So I've got a piece of watercolor paper here, and this is where I'm going to do a little bit of stamping and coloring. I've got my old olive ink pad here, and I'm going to be using the tree image from the stamp set called Most Wonderful Time. I've really had a lot of fun with this. This is offered as an entire product medley inside the holiday catalog with Stampin' Up. If you don't already have a demonstrator and you're interested in receiving a complimentary copy of the holiday catalog as well as the annual catalog, head over to lisasstampstudio.com and click on Contact Me. So I've got the tree image here. It is photopolymer, which means it's completely clear. Wonderful to use, especially for beginners, because you can see that the stamp turns the color of the ink. And I'll go ahead and stamp that here. Watercolor paper has a slightly different surface than regular cardstock. It's a little bit more bumpy, and that's because it's very resistant to water. I'm going to color the image in, and the easiest way to do that is to take a separate clear block, and I'm going to tap that right here on top of the ink pad, and that's going to pick up some color. I'll be using my aqua painter to add that color to this image. You just unscrew the cap and you add tap water down inside. This eliminates the need for a small cup and water and of course dripping. So everything is self-contained here. I like to give the bristles a nice squeeze to make sure that it's not oversaturated with water. And then I'm going to take some of the color that's here and I'm going to thin it out from the water inside the bristles. And then I'm simply going to paint this on. Now, I am no artist, so I'm just going to spread the color on. Light and dark areas are going to be wonderful for this image because you want it to look like there's branches underneath here. So do your best to stay within the lines, and even some areas that are not covered, that are completely white, are totally fine. You'll need to let this dry for just a few minutes, and then when it's dry, you can actually come back and add areas of darker color if you choose. When you're all finished, you're going to hold this over your Stampin' Chamois or your Stampin' Scrub, and you're going to squeeze it so that water will run through the bristles to clean it off. This now can be cleaned in the exact same manner right on your chamois or your Stampin' Scrub. I'll set that aside for right now, and I'm going to bring in a regular piece of Whisper White cardstock, and I'm going to stamp the gift boxes that are going to go underneath my tree. I'm going to be using the Real Red ink pad for that. The stamp set actually has separate images for the package as well as the bows, which makes this really easy to use, especially if you want 2 different colors, which I do. So I've got the package image here, and you're going to see all 3 are lined up. I'm going to go ahead and ink that up on my ink pad, and I'll stamp that here. I've got the bow image here, and I'm going to be using my black ink pad for this, simply to tie into the color scheme of my card. So I'm going to go ahead and now ink up that image, and because it's photopolymer, it's going to be very easy for you to line up. The beauty of this product is it's also including coordinating dies. So I have dies here for the gift boxes as well as the Christmas tree. The great thing about this is even though this die is one piece as it is here for the images, it will die cut 3 separate gift packages all at one time, which eliminates that little fussiness of small little images that you're die cutting. I've die cut those pieces just off camera, and now we're ready to do our assembly. Now we're ready to assemble our pieces. I've got my silicone craft sheet here for our next step, and now what we're going to do is we're going to seal the card. I'm going to be using tear and tape. I want a nice strong adhesive for this. We're going to place the tear and tape here down the side and across the bottom. So I'll go ahead and open up my tape. I want to place it as close to the outside edge as possible, and I'll tear. And then I'm going to turn this to make it easier for my hand, and again, working as close to the bottom edge as you can, and then come all the way across. Once that's in place, you're going to want to burnish this or press this down inside the cardstock. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use the Take Your Pick tool with the paper piercing tool attachment, and we're going to remove that paper backing. Now all we have to do is just close up the card, and that's going to create the pocket for our greeting. I have a piece of cardstock here that I'm going to stamp the greeting on. I've come back to the Memento black ink, and I've pulled out the greeting from that exact same stamp set that says, "Oh Christmas Tree." You'll want to stamp this as near to the top and all the way to the right as possible. And while we're working on the inside of the card, I'm going to stamp the additional greeting. This says, "Hope you have a wonderful Christmas." Again, all from that same stamp set, and I'm going to stamp that here near the bottom. I opted to create a small pull tab for this piece so that it was more obvious that it needed to be pulled out. This is 2.5 inches of the beautiful black glittered organdy ribbon. I'm going to be using a glue dot. I'm going to place it on one of the raw ends here. And then I'm going to bring the 2 raw ends together to make a loop. I'm going to use one more glue dot, and I'm going to place that on the back side, and I'm flipped it over so that now the glue dot will be here, and I'll place that here near the top, leaving some of that loop exposed. I've got the tree image here, and I'm going to flip that over, and I'm using my full-size dimensionals, and I'll place those here on the back. I'm going to use that same Take Your Pick tool attachment, and I'm going to remove those paper backings. This now will go on the front of our card, and I opted to put it in the center. Now, before I go too far, I decided to add a little bit of glitter, and now is the best time. You can certainly do that while the image is smaller in your hand, but this is a lot neater for me. Again, I'm going to protect my work surface, and this time I'm going to be using my multi-purpose liquid glue. The great thing about the silicone craft sheet is that liquid glue, hot glue, and adhesive will not stick to it. So I can get my glue started here to make sure that it's flowing well, and then once this dries, I can rub it right off. I want my glue to be very thin. I don't want it to be too thick. So I'm just going to kind of take it and just mush it around on the areas of the bough branches and where I want the glitter to lay. I've got my Dazzling Diamonds glitter here, and I love to use a plastic spoon to scoop it out, and I can work right over my container. And I'm going to sprinkle very generously. I want to make sure I cover all those spots, and then I'm just going to dump the excess right back into that container. So there we go. That'll need to sit for about a minute so that glue can dry and set the glitter. My next step will be to add that small foil star. I'll flip that upside down here on my silicone craft sheet. I'm going to grab one of my mini dimensionals and I'm going to adhere that here to the center, and then I'll remove that paper backing as well. And then I'm going to overlap the top of my tree just slightly to adhere the star. Now we have our gift packages. My suggestion to you is to kind of lay them out where you're going to want them before you start adhering them. I'm going to be using a glue dot near the top and a dimensional near the bottom because of the elevation difference here. So I've got my glue dots. I'm going to add that here near the top of this tall present. And then on the back side here, I'm going to grab one of my mini dimensionals and I'm going to place that near the bottom, and I'll remove that paper backing. That gift now is going to go here near the bottom left. I chose to take the longer rectangle box and I'll do the exact same thing. I'm going to place a glue dot here near the top, and at the bottom I'm going to add a mini dimensional, and this one's going to go over here to the right. I'm going to tuck it underneath just a little bit on this card. And then this gift is going to overlap on top of these. So I can go ahead and use dimensionals. So I'll place one here and I'll place another one next to it, and then I'll remove those paper backings on these. This now will get adhered over the top. Our next step will be the card insert. Now I want to give you a little tip. When you put the tear and tape on here, sometimes the pocket's a little tight at first. Take your bone folder and very carefully come inside and go across the bottom and then up the side. All that's going to do is provide a little bit of give to the fibers of the cardstock so that your insert will slide in a lot easier. So that's going to go right down inside, and of course then it's going to be positioned perfectly so you can see the greeting, and then the pull tab here makes it more intuitive for the receiver. Here's the card we created together today, and the one I created before you joined me. If you have enjoyed today's video, would you please give it a thumbs up here on YouTube, which is a like, it certainly helps. And I look forward to having you with me next time. Have a great day.